When God's judgment silences wars and the Son of Man spreads his banner over the nations, history will tread on new ground. We call this period the Millennium, 1,000 years in which Christ reigns. Revelation 20:1-6. The Bible describes days of palpable justice, peace that reaches the streets, and the knowledge of God that covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. Isaiah 11:9. But how to imagine this kingdom? If Christ publicly ruled the earth today, what would the streets, the market, and the governments be like? In the millennium, justice becomes routine. Peace has an address, and truth pays the bills. Watch and discover how society breathes when the throne touches the ground. Before that, however, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. The beginning of everything. The scenario begins with the parousia. Christ appears in glory, visible, undeniable, with power and great glory. Matthew 24:30. The evil that has operated for centuries is contained. Satan is imprisoned for 1,000 years so that he cannot deceive the nations. Revelation 21:3. The world feels the relief of breathing without the continuous storm of diabolical seduction. Wars cease. Swords become the blades of the sword. Isaiah 2:4. In Jerusalem, the Messiah's throne becomes a reference point for justice. Psalms 2. Zechariah 1:49-16. The survivors of the final upheavals learn the way of the Lord, and the peoples ascend to worship the King. The kingdom is earthly, real, and public. Christ reigns, and the saints share in this administration. They lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Revelation 24. The resurrected, the blessed, and the saints of the first resurrection participate in the government. Revelation 26. Judging cases. 1 Corinthians 6:2. And spreading holiness in the culture. Creation feels echoes of Eden. Ferocity is tamed. Isaiah 1:16-8. Longevity reappears. Isaiah 65:20-25. Work flourishes with justice. Isaiah 65:21-23. Up to this point, the landscape is shared. Now we zoom in to see how each current organizes the events and emphases, a historical millennial premillennialism. This view usually affirms a single glorious coming of Christ at the end of the Great Tribulation, followed by the millennium. The church is the Israel of God, incorporating Jews and Gentiles into one people. Ephesians 2:14-16, Galatians 6:16. Without denying promises to Israel, but seeing their fulfillment in Christ and in his united people. The millennium is the messianic reign in which the martyrs and resurrected faithful rule with Christ. Israel's presence is highlighted because of biblical history, but there is no ontological separation between the church and Israel in the kingdom's economy. 2. Dispensational premillennialism. Here the narrative is organized into dispensations and emphasizes the distinction between Israel and the church. In many readings, there is a rapture of the church before, or, according to some interpretations, in the middle to the end of the tribulation. 1 Thessalonians 4:16-17, followed by the visible return of Christ with his saints to establish the millennium. The millennium brings the literal fulfillment of the promises to Israel, Jerusalem, as the capital of the world. Zechariah 14. A temple described in Ezekiel 40:48 with memorial sacrifices, not expiatory ones, because the cross is definitive. Hebrews 10:14. The land divided according to Ezekiel 47:48 and the nations coming to worship. The glorified church reigns with Christ, while converted Israel occupies a national role. At the center of the plan, without losing spiritual unity with the saints of all ages. Imagine the scene. The church, the believers in Christ since Pentecost, had already been taken to heaven years before in the rapture, escaping the Great Tribulation. Now it returns with Christ, not as mortal subjects, but as his glorified bride, with immortal bodies. They are the co-rulers, the administrators of the kingdom. Revelation 20 verse 4. But whom do they rule? On earth, there are still people in natural bodies. These are those who survived the tribulation, both Jews and Gentiles, who turned to Christ during that terrible time. Matthew 25:31-40. The nation of Israel, now repentant and believing and restored to its land, Jerusalem becomes the literal capital of the world. Zechariah 14:16. The Davidic covenant is fulfilled with Jesus physically sitting on the throne of David. In this story, the world is a place of fascinating duality. Glorified saints like angels rule and interact with mortal human beings. These mortals still marry, have children, and live incredibly long lives. Isaiah 65:20. The curse on nature is partially lifted. The wolf and the lamb graze together. Isaiah 11:6. The presence of Christ guarantees instant justice. It is the kingdom where heaven, the glorified saints, visibly touches the earth, the mortal subjects, all centered on the redeemed nation of Israel. The social, economic, and political context. Imagine rebuilt cities without corruption, commerce without fraud, courts without bribery. The king's law flows from Zion. Isaiah 2:3. Idolatry becomes anachronistic. The Lord is known from the least to the greatest. Jeremiah 31:34. Worldwide pilgrimages converge on Jerusalem for the great feasts. Zechariah 14:1-19. In a visible testimony that worship shapes politics, arts, and education, the king's discipline is loving and firm. Isaiah 11:3-5. The renewed earth yields fruit. Social justice is not a program, but the reflection of a throne. Alongside the resurrected who reign, there are living nations that have learned obedience. Children play without fear. Zechariah 8:5. The elderly enjoy abundant years. Isaiah 65:20. Structural violence is dismantled. Weapons become tools. Peace treaties are not rhetoric but daily practice. The millennium is God's pedagogy for history. What would the world be like when perfect authority governs? The streets become safe. Children return to play in the squares. The elderly walk without fear. Zechariah 8:4-5. The violence that once organized life loses its throne. There are no pockets of exception. Where evil reigns, just discipline is immediate. Isaiah 11:3-5. Christ's authority is not arbitrary. It is God's original design applied to human coexistence. Therefore, education flourishes. The knowledge of the Lord covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. Isaiah 11:9. Truth ceases to be a luxury for the few and becomes commonplace. Parents teach by example. Teachers teach without ideologies that deny the Creator, and biblical wisdom becomes the moral literacy of the nations. Isaiah 2:3. Public health is transformed because creation itself is healed. The desert flourishes. Isaiah 35:1. Longevity becomes the norm again. Isaiah 65:20-22. Organisms, soil, water, and climate respond to the Creator's rule. It is not ecological utopia. It is the restoration of Eden on a historical scale. Life is extended not by isolated miracle, but because sin ceases to structure daily life. Where lies wasted time and killed projects, truth now saves lives. Work ceases to be war and becomes a vocation again. They will build houses and dwell in them. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. Isaiah 65:21. The text does not speak of luxury, but of justice in the harvest. He who plants eats, he who builds dwells. No one works for the pockets of others anymore because of oppression. Isaiah 65:22-23. The economy then moves away from the regime of artificial scarcity that produced by fraud, idolatry, and violence, and enters into responsible abundance. The land responds with productivity. He who plows will reap what he who reaps. Amos 9:13. The blessing accelerates cycles, seeds sprout, vines ripen, barns fill, but without waste and without exploitation. Trade exists, but without corruption. Weights and measures are faithful. Proverbs 11:1. Contracts are simple because one's word is once again given its due. Disputes decrease. Courts cease to be arenas of cunning and become houses of equity, guided by the king himself and his administrators. 1 Corinthians 6:2, Revelation 26. Taxes are not instruments of abuse, but transparent means to support public service, worship, and works of mercy. Profit is not demonized, but the love of money loses its mystique. Wealth circulates as resources for the king's mission. Isaiah 65 verses 5 to 11. Economic geography is organized around Jerusalem, now the capital of the world. Zechariah 14:16. The nations bring their gifts not as humiliating taxation, but as an act of worship. The gold of culture, the silver of labor, the wood of arts and crafts, the engineering of restored cities. Isaiah 60. Production does not serve idols, it serves people and worships God. Global logistics ceases to wage wars. Swords become reliads and plowshares. Isaiah 2:4. Industries and weaponry are converted into peace infrastructure. Human creativity is freed from idolatry. It becomes liturgy, music, architecture, literature, technology. All with holiness to the Lord, engraved on the bells of the horses. Zechariah 14:20. Politically, the millennium is a messianic monarchy. Christ reigns from Jerusalem. Psalm 2, Zechariah 149. But it is not bureaucratic centralism, it is distributive government. They will reign with him. Revelation 20 verse 6. The resurrected saints serve as administrators, prefects of justice, trustworthy judges, wise counselors, spiritual and public authority at the same time. And the boundary between worship and civil life disappears without confusion. To worship the king is also to build bridges, cultivate gardens, legislate with equity. The king's law is moral, cultural, and international. Moral because it assesses intentions. He judges the poor with justice and decides with equity in favor of the meek. Isaiah 11:4. Cultural because it reorients arts, education, and work toward international truth. Because nations continue to exist, each with its purified identity, and they journey in a common calendar of worship. Zechariah 14:16-19. There is, therefore, a diplomacy of worship. States send delegations to the Lord's feasts, and fidelity is measured not by dealing with secrets, but by public devotion. Sanctions are not geopolitical interests, they are the pedagogical discipline of the king himself. Zechariah 14:17-19. Peace does not depend on temporary alliances. It is manna from the throne, the iron rod, Psalm 2:9. Revelation 19:15 does not describe tyranny, it describes the inflexibility of justice. Evil does not negotiate with Christ. Christ does not negotiate with evil. Therefore, crime finds no refuge where there is sin. Among those yet to be born during the millennium, correction will be firm and restoration swift. The impunity that today fuels cycles of hatred ends. Order is not maintained by fear, but by reverence. The civil calendar incorporates the calendar of worship. The nations ascend, learn, sing, offer. Zechariah 14:16. The temple. Read according to the emphasis of each interpreter. It fulfills the role of a pedagogical center of holiness. Ezekiel 40:48, Hebrews 10-14. Sacrifices, if present in a memorial key, point to the Lamb. If read symbolically, they describe the purification of worship and life. In both cases, Jerusalem becomes the university of the world. The liturgy educates the hearts of nations. Arts are born from the altar. Psalms return to the public squares. Literature quotes prophets. Architecture writes in stone what the word has written in hearts. There is no censorship on a whim. There is promotion of what is true, good, and beautiful. Cultural idolatries, the cult of the body, of power, of money, lose their charm. Culture stops selling nostalgia for Eden and begins to experience Eden. There is no scandal industry, only a beauty industry. Parties don't end in hangovers, they end in thanksgiving. Joy ceases to be a distraction and becomes the structuring grace. Diplomacy no longer deals with borderlines but with lines of holiness. How each people with their gifts will enrich the common table of the kingdom. Ethnic conflicts dissolve because national pride loses its altar. The honor of nations does not disappear, it is consecrated. There is no imperialism, because the only empire is Christ's, and his yoke is easy. Matthew 11:30. Embassies deal with agricultural cooperation, academic exchanges, preservation of creation, artistic initiatives. State secrecy becomes the exception. transparency the norm. Social justice is not a slogan, it is daily practice. The poor are not statistics, they are close. The orphan and the widow do not need campaigns, they are sustained by communities through the compassion of the King. Isaiah 11:4. Isaiah 61:1-4. Property is responsibility, not absolution. Institutionalized generosity, without inhumane bureaucracy. Announced cities are rebuilt by hands that pray and build. Isaiah 6:4. This is not a revolution that tears down to start from scratch, but a restoration that heals, preserves, and builds. Justice that educates, glory that matures. From either perspective, the millennium is pedagogical and doxological. Pedagogical, because it reveals how humanity responds when evil is contained and perfect authority governs. Even so, hearts need grace. Doxological, because the glory of Christ becomes the sun that governs the seasons of culture. Prophets like Isaiah and Zechariah become a roadmap for daily life. Justice that never fails. Global knowledge of the Lord. Isaiah 2:2-3. Healing of historical wounds. Isaiah 61. The King's law is not tyranny. It is the Creator's original design applied to public life. The poor are defended. Isaiah 11:4. The humble receive a voice, and lies lose market share. The music changes, the architecture changes, the books change, because the throne redefines the stage. Where there is ruin today, there will be reconstruction. Isaiah 6:4. Where today there is desert, gardens spring up. Isaiah 35:1. The millennium does not cancel history, it redeems history. The enigma of the end within the end. But why, after 1,000 years of light, will there be rebellion? The Bible is direct. After the 1,000 years are fulfilled, Satan will be released to deceive the nations. Revelation 27:8. It is the final shock. Proof that grace is indispensable even in the best environment. Gog and Magog represent the global coalition against the King. It is not a balanced battle. Fire descends from heaven and consumes the rebels. Revelation 20:9. The defeated devil is thrown into the lake of fire. Revelation 20:10. Then, the great white throne appears, the books are opened, and the dead are judged. Revelation 20:11-15. So finally, not just a millennium but new heavens and a new earth. No death, mourning, or crying or pain. Revelation 21:1-4.